And we are rolling on the 18th day of October, 2016, here at UCLA, where it's a beautiful day. The sunshine is shining. And we're about to hear from Laura, who's going to share with us a film that really moved her.
Hi, I'm Laura.
Hi, Laura.
And whenever I hear the two musical notes, dun-na, dun-na, I'm instantly filled with a whirlwind of emotions. And that's because those are the two notes that underlie the score of Steven Spielberg's 1975 classic, Jaws. So today I'm going to tell you how Jaws moved me, and specifically made me feel three emotions: how Jaws made me feel scared, anxious, and loved. And in case you haven't seen Jaws, it's a movie about a great white shark that terrorizes a small island town off the East Coast. And Jaws deals with some pretty significant themes that I know you'll be interested in. According to Hannah Harwolensky of New York Times Magazine in 2013, the reason why Jaws resonates so strongly with viewers is because it deals not with sharks, but with fear, and not with action, but suspense. And it's this kind of emotional manipulation of viewers that, according to Harwolensky, allowed millions of people to become scared of going into 71% of the Earth's surface. So now I'm going to start by telling you how I was actually one of those millions of people that was scared by Jaws. Jaws opens up with a very vivid scene in which a young girl is the victim of a shark attack. She is night swimming and the shark grabs her and she's thrashed around in the water, screaming, flailing. There's blood everywhere. And this image really stuck with me and really scared me because my dad actually lives in a small beach town in Northern California, which is very similar to the town in Jaws. And there's actually great white shark sightings there about once a year. So after watching Jaws for the first time, I was terrified to go back into the water. I just had the image of the girl being eaten by a shark going in my head. And one time I actually did make it into the water, and I was swimming around having a good time, and I saw a dorsal fin in the distance. And I lost it. I started screaming and I just booked it out of the water as fast as I could. I was so scared. And then I turned around and realized it was a dolphin. But that really just shows you how much Jaws affected me and how much it made me scared of swimming in the water. But Jaws didn't only just make me feel scared, it made me feel very anxious. In the movie, you never know when the shark is going to attack or who it's going to attack. And so the entire time I watched Jaws, I was just sitting in my seat, waiting for a bloody shark attack at every turn. And this made me very anxious. And this reminded me of the same feeling I feel whenever I go on planes. I am terrified of flying. I hate it. It stresses me out. And I really particularly don't like turbulence. So whenever I'm in planes, I'm just holding on to the edge of my seat the entire time, waiting for turbulence or something worse. And so So watching Jaws made me feel the same anxiety that I feel on planes. So that really hit close to home for me. But I didn't only get negative feelings from watching Jaws, I also got some pretty positive feelings. For example, Jaws made me feel loved. And this might seem kind of weird, but even though Jaws capitalizes on gore and suspense and violence, and at the end of the day, I believe Jaws is a movie about the lengths a father will go to protect his son. So in the movie, the police chief, whose name is Brody, does relatively little to combat the shark problem facing his town. But once his own son narrowly escapes a shark attack, he jumps into action. After seeing his own son almost get killed, he decides to go on a dangerous expedition to kill the shark. And so this is a great sacrifice that Brody makes in order to save his family. And the actions Brody took reminded me of my own father. When I was 11, my leg was run over by a go-kart. And it wasn't just run over, I actually got pinned underneath the go-kart and my entire leg turned the complete opposite way around that it's not supposed to. And so I fell to the ground and was screaming in pain. And my dad heard me, ran to me, lifted the go-kart up with one arm all by himself, and pulled me out with the other. And so his heroic actions were a great physical sacrifice to him, but it just proved how much he loved me and how far he was willing to go in order to save me. And so watching Brody save his son reminded me of how much my dad loves me and how far he would go to protect me. So in the end, watching Jaws makes me appreciate the sacrifices parents make for their children. So in conclusion, I've told you how Jaws made me feel three emotions: how it made me feel scared, how it made me feel anxious, and how it made me feel loved. And hopefully after hearing about my ocean adventures, my stressful plane flights, and my heroic father, you'll understand that the emotions I felt while watching Jaws hit very close to home. And now you also understand why whenever I hear the two notes, "Donna, Donna," I'm instantly filled with a sea of emotions. Thank you.
Thank you. 444.
Hi, I'm Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
And I really liked your speech. I really liked how you really made vivid images of like what was going on, both what you saw in the movie and also what happened to you in real life, especially like the sort of the dorsal fin when you're out in the ocean, and how you really like showed like what you really felt when you're in the water and how you booked it back to shore.
Yeah. So there's a good connection between the movie scenes and her personal stories. Improvement?
Hi, I'm Stacy.
Hi, Stacy.
I liked your speech. I liked how you used like the music notes at the beginning and the end. It was a good callback. One thing for improvement, you had like a couple of awkward pauses where you're trying to remember it, I assume, but other than that, it was pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. That will come with just practice. Laura, you went a little over time. I don't know if you timed this or what you thought. You thought
It's supposed to be
5 minutes? Yeah. Okay, I guess we'll leave it at 5 minutes. Okay, we'll leave it at 5 minutes. I thought I said 4, but okay, let's say 5. Is everyone thinking 5?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
5 it is. So you didn't go overtime. You were perfect. I love the da-da-da-da thing in the beginning and the tie back to it at the end, musical and creative and different, and it's a couple of notes that everyone recognizes. So that was excellent. So that was good, very creative, and you then segued into your thesis preview of Scared, Anxious, and Loved, and yes, I initially thought it would be odd to see how you were loved by Jaws, but skeptical. You made me less skeptical after I heard your story, so that was good. Your significant statement, you quoted the New York Times Magazine. Remember to stress the date in 2013, so we know that it's recent and like that. And you had the quote down, so that I'm impressed that you knew the whole long quote and you could say it all. Remember, folks, to say whether you agree or disagree with the quote, and say, well, and I agree with this, or I disagree with this, and then go on to say, and this is how it affected me. Okay? On your main body, your first emotion, you talked about being scared. Oh, also, it will help you relax if you walk 3 times. Let me see you practice walking right now 3 times. Tell us about your morning walk. 3 steps this way, 5 steps that way, and 3 steps back to center. Telling us about your morning.
Okay, so this morning my roommate's alarm went off. It was really early because she had an 8 a.m. But she didn't wake up.
Go to the power stance when you come to a stop.
But she didn't wake up from her alarm, so I had to get up and wake her up, which she wasn't too happy with, but she made it to her 8 a.m., which was good. And then I decided just to get up and study for a little bit. And then after waking up to study, I went to class, and now I'm here.
Okay. A little bit further that way, a little bit further that way, but you get the idea. You're getting the idea. And when you come to a stop in the power stance. That will relax you a little bit. Let's go to your emotions. Scared. Scared because your father lives in a beach town in NorCal, and there are sharks there occasionally, and you saw one, and you stretched out, you told the story very well, you ran out of the water, and you were screaming and freaking out, and it turned out to be, something else. And that was a good story and well told, and we felt your fear. We felt how scared you were, and you returned to the emotion you were remembering and felt sensing. You say, and that's why I felt scared. We felt it too. So that was a good job doing that. Okay? On the second emotion, anxious, this is a little bit more subtle emotion to communicate. Here you told us you're afraid to fly on, stay in the power stance, you're afraid to fly on airplanes, and you hold on to the armrest, especially you're worried about turbulence. And I guess I got a little bit of your fear from that, but I didn't get a whole lot of it, but, so what? On the third emotion of love, you told the story of being mangled by a go-kart and your father saving you and lifting the go-kart off with one hand and pulling you out with the other, and you really felt his love and protection at that moment. The summary, the conclusion, call it a summary, not a conclusion. It's a summary, meaning in summary I've told you 3 ways that the film moved me. It made me scared, anxious, and love. In conclusion, there should be no doubt in this room. The film Jaws really moved me. Those are different things. And then do da-da-da-da. Let's talk about your kanai. You said breathe. Have a variation in your voice more. And make good 5-second eye contact. How did it go?
In the beginning, I forgot about the eye contact, but then I remembered it,
Uh-huh.
and I picked it back up. So
Okay,
that went
good.
okay.
Okay.
Variation voice. I don't think I did it as well as I would have hoped, but I tried.
Okay,
And
good.
breathing. Still need to work on that one.
Yeah, your voice is still shaking and breaking a little. And so take a deep breath just before you start your speech. And if you can just pause in the middle if you have to and just go, and start it again so you have that. Because you get into a shallow breath breathing pattern and then you keep it. And you keep it going. That would be helpful. There's a book that I sometimes recommend for students that has breathing and vocal exercises in it. If you're interested, it's called "Change Your Voice, Change Your Life." So you can get it at Amazon. It's a good book, $5 or something. But it's good text. The guy used to teach here. So, what else? That was enough. Yeah. I want to stress to everybody that what I like the most about what Laura did was she came back to the emotion at the end of her segment and said what emotion she was communicating, and that's helpful to the audience so they really know what you're felt sensing and what you're feeling there, and you tell them that. So that was a good job, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Another B. Yes. Great. Take a step that way. Thank you. Good. Perfect. Is it Magali? Is it Magali? Magali. Okay, Magali. Magali stands before you, managing attention, communicating respect. All computers and phones are away. All books are closed. Pens are down. Everyone's looking at Magali. She says to herself, I respect my audience and really means it. Finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Say your name, feel the love. Start your speech.
Hi everyone, I'm Magali.
Hi, Magali.
Hello. So in 2007, Molly Friedenberg from the Santa Barbara Independent said that Click is an endearing comedy. It's either filled with lots of heart, soul, or I just shouldn't have had that beer with my dinner. And I think that's the perfect quote to describe this movie, because before I even watched this movie, I kind of had my expectations on what to expect in an Adam Sandler film. I thought there'd be, a lot of potty humor, fart jokes, and it was there, it definitely was there, but I didn't expect myself to connect to this movie as much as I did. This movie made me laugh, it made me appreciate struggles in life, and it made me cry. This movie deals with a lot of themes like family, balancing work, and
Workaholic fathers.
Okay, but this movie is about a workaholic man, and he gets his hands on a universal remote, and this remote allows him to fast forward through many parts of his life and pause and rewind. And at first it's really cool, and he skips through things like traffic and arguments with his wife, but then it ends up taking a twist when it starts malfunctioning. So first of all, this movie made me laugh. There's this scene where Michael, which is Adam Sandler, where his son is playing catch with the neighborhood boy. And this boy happens to be like a little bully too. He's always giving him like backhanded compliments. And there's this time where they're playing catch and the boy tells his son, "You suck." So then Michael in the movie pauses the remote and then he moves his arm so that way when he resumes time, the ball just hits him right in the face. And this scene was really funny, and it reminded me one time when I was younger, when I was really small, my cousin, we had like this love-hate relationship, and she would always pick on me. And we were swimming one time, and my mom had told me that she had just finished mopping inside the house, so the floor was slippery. But I decided not to tell her, and she runs inside, and she immediately slips, and she just lands really hard on her back. And it reminded me of that time because I was like taking revenge on her, kind of how Michael in the movie was taking revenge, like to protect his son. So that's what made me laugh. And the second way it moved me is that it really made me appreciate struggle. Initially, Michael's really fascinated with this remote because he gets to skip through all the work that he does in order to get to his promotion. So when he fast forwards in time, he's already promoted and he has this cool car, he has all this money, but he doesn't really appreciate it just because he skipped through all the work that he had to do for it. And then I kind of put it into perspective into my life, how I hate, doing assignments and doing homework, and it's so tedious, but I thought to myself, like, well, if I'm doing this now and I realize all the struggle that I'm going through to get my diploma at the end of the day is just going to be worth so much more. Unlike Michael, he has this cool car, but he doesn't really appreciate it because he doesn't know what it took for him to get it, and he doesn't have anyone to share it with at the end of the day. So it really made me appreciate that struggle. And the third emotion that I felt was I cried. I felt really sad because there is a scene where he fast forwards into the future and his son tells him that his father has passed away a couple years ago. So then Michael goes back in time and he goes back to the last interaction he had with his father. And in this scene, his father's trying to get him to stop working for a couple hours and go out and hang out with him. But Michael's just not having it. He's really, focused on work, and he blows him off, and he's really cold with him. And it just reminded me of something that my mom always tells me. She tells me, I'm gonna die one day, and you're gonna be sad. I'm not gonna live forever. Every time I do something else, maybe I had plans with her, I have plans with my friends, she tells me that. And it really put it into perspective because I didn't want to feel like Michael. One day he regrets how he treated his father, and I didn't want to feel that way with my mom. So it really made me sad and made me hit home and made me think of life without my mom, and I didn't want to feel regretful. So to conclude this movie really made me laugh. It made me appreciate the struggle, and it made me cry. I know this movie has a lot of themes that many of you may be interested in. It deals with family, balancing work, and the death of a loved one. So you guys should get a chance to check it out, and I'm sure you'd really like it.
Thank you. Okay, where are we? Here, yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Evan.
Hi, Evan.
And something that I liked that you did was when you kind of lost your train of thought, you kind of just recovered really quickly and just kept on going as if it didn't happen. I think that was pretty good. It seemed natural. That was something I did in my first speech, so I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, you sort of fake it. It seems like a natural thing, so I keep going. Yeah. Improvement?
Hi, my name's Hannah.
Hi, Hannah.
And like Evan said, you lost your train of thought a couple times, which I feel like kind of tripped you up, but you were, like you said, able to recover very well. Kind of the opposite side of the same coin, but overall really good.
Yeah. Magali, remember not to wear white when you're performing. I can see your head, but your rest of you is white. Okay. You started with your quote from the Santa Barbara Independent. You knew it quite well. Remember, it was a good quote. Remember to, it was a funny quote too. I liked it. I laughed at it. Remember, if you're going to start with a quote, then tie back to it at the end and say something like, had a beer with it or something, so it's we remember the beginning quote. So, or you say, or as Molly Friedenberg reminded us in the Santa Barbara Independent, great movie to have a beer with. Something so we know we've come the full circle, because that's how you started your speech. But thank you for having a unique way of starting your speech with a quote and not just with a rhetorical question or a joke or something else, but something unique and creative, and I appreciate that. Remember to say whether you agree or disagree with the quote. Okay. Now, your thesis was fine. We want to somehow get in the thesis, the preview, so the narrative hangs out there for our audience. So I'm going to tell you 3 ways to film movement, so really with your voice, so that we really know that's coming, okay, in the thesis part of the statement. And your SIG statement was, you said the film deals with significant, relatable themes. I know you'll be interested in this themes of family, balancing work, and the death of loved ones. So those were good things that you wrote down. I would have liked you to have said those and elaborated on those a little bit more. On your, when you watch yourself tonight on YouTube, you're going to see that even though you're in the power stance, you constantly sway a little bit like this. So try to lock your legs a little bit so you stand firm and you pull the power of the earth up from you, and you just don't really locked in and you don't sway. Your first laugh story of your cousin, you remembered your cousin picking on you and you getting even by letting her slip on the wet floor was funny, and I got your laugh out of that. And remember to return to the emotion and say, and that's why it made me laugh. So say that, and that's why this thing made me laugh. Kind of get us to laugh too, see? Second emotion, you said, it made me appreciate the struggle. And I wasn't quite so sure what kind of emotion appreciate the struggle was going to be. So when you finally fleshed it out, I finally got it, was you talked about perseverance. It made me realize the importance of perseverance and of self-discipline, of doing your work first and taking time to plan to get a diploma, and then you know the worth of it and that sort of thing. That's what you're trying to say, right? Yeah. On your third emotion, and this was your potentially best one, where you said it made me cry. And remember, folks, for all of you, to make the setup shorter, just say in the film a sentence or two. His father begged him to spend time with him. He blew him off. And this reminded me of when I blow my mom off, and she says, I'm not going to be here. And you're going to think about that sometime when you look back on these times that you blew me off. And she's right. Because life is very fleeting. But the emotion that you were communicating was, you said it made you cry. So I would have liked to seen you remember that you tear up and almost remember that you were brought to tears by your mother and how sad you were at this scene, and it reminded you of the idea of losing your mother and not having her there to console you and to talk with you and do all the things that mothers and daughters do, you know. So that was a little bit of a lost opportunity, in my opinion, but it had great potential, but you did it fairly well. Okay? The summary was fine. The conclusion was fine. And as I said, the tie back, I would have liked the tie back to be more vivid to the quote that you started out with. You just tied back to, you said the film discusses balancing really much more to your significant statement than to a vivid remembrance of how you started with the quote, okay? Let's talk about your canai. Stop looking up. Incorporate more meaningful pauses. Incorporate movement. How'd it go?
I think I definitely stopped looking up a bit. I was trying to, at least look more towards the back of the room.
Good.
My pauses, I feel like they could have been better.
You're still doing that when I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And incorporate movement. I guess before I was using my hands too much, but now I guess I'm just moving my body, so I should.
Yeah, and if I said you're moving your hands too much, don't overcompensate and hold them stiffly at your side. Let them just be natural and move. It's this craziness that becomes very distracting, but just let them be natural by your side and move. If you can lock your legs a little bit more, and just watch yourself when you're swaying, and if you practice with a live person, and I hope you do, and not just a mirror, and if you can tell them one of your goals next time is to not sway, if you can have them go like this when you start to sway, then you can become aware of what your body's doing while you're speaking, and you can stop it. Okay? Other than that, very nice job. I like the movie you chose. People think it was, like you said, that it's going to be this Adam Sandler fart movie, but it really wasn't. There was pretty serious themes in there, and it was good. Thank you. Okay, do we have another B? Yeah. Okay. Oh, another white shirt. Boy, we're on a roll. What's this with white shirts? Okay. Okay. Evan stands before us, managing attention, communicating respect non-verbally. Can you take a half step forward, a little bit closer to the wall? I'll move the camera then. Finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Say your name, feel the love, start your speech.
Alright, so, hi, my name is Evan.
Hi, Evan.
And so, growing up in Southern California my entire life, my love for the beach and the ocean has always been something that has been very important to me. And so, it seemed kind of like an easy pick to choose the movie that I did, because the majority of the film deals with time in the ocean, if not all of it. And so, the movie that I watched was Finding Nemo. And so Finding Nemo deals with a clownfish, or devoted clownfish father named Marlin and his son Nemo. And so one day Nemo is kidnapped by a pair of Australian divers, and it is basically a story about Marlin's quest and adventure with his soon-to-be companion Dory to find Nemo and bring him back home. So I know this film deals with some significant themes I know you'll be interested in. Christian Evely of Screen Education states that Marlin braves the perils of the ocean and risks his life to save the one that he loves, which I think speaks to the commitment theme in this movie, which he never gives up and tries to save his son. So the first way in which this film moved me was that it made me feel with that all being said, I'm going to talk about how this film, Finding Nemo, moved me. It made me feel determined. It reminded me of the dangers of peer pressure, and it made me laugh. So the first way that this film moved me was it made me feel determined. Throughout the film, there are many incidents in which determination is displayed, but the one that stood out to me was when Marlin and Dory escaped from a shark named Bruce at a Fish Off Friends Not Food AA meeting. And so basically Dory gets a nosebleed, and the shark, who is trying to become a vegetarian, who is Bruce, tries to eat her, but they cleverly escape and don't let that stand in the way of reaching their goal, which is finding Nemo. And so the reason why this makes me feel determined is because I remember in junior year when I got an 89.8% in my English class that my teacher would not round me because she said that it would motivate me to do better next semester. And so she was right. I was extremely hell-bent on getting that A, and I did. So I think that there's a parallel between the determination that I had to get that better grade and to not ever give up, just like Marlin. So the second way in which this film moved me was that it reminded me about the dangers of peer pressure. So the incident in the film that reminded me of this was when a bunch of Nemo's friends at the drop-off dare him to go and touch the boat, which is anchored across the reef or the water. Now, Nemo ends up going to go and touch the boat, but on his way back, the Australian diver takes him and he is kidnapped and taken to Sydney. So, the reason why this incident reminds me of peer pressure is because 3 years ago I was skiing with some family and friends, and they dared me to ski off of a 25-foot cliff. Now, I'm an experienced skier, and it had snowed a lot the night before, so I said, you know what, okay, I'll just do it. And so I launched off of this cliff, but I ended up spraining my ankle. So it kind of reminded me that, listening to or giving into peer pressure is not always the best route to go, and that it can lead to some pretty severe pain. And so the third way that this film moved me was that it made me laugh. The incident in the film that made me laugh was when Dory and Marlin start swimming down a dark abyss to find the goggles that they dropped. And Dory just starts singing, "Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming." And so the reason why this makes me laugh is because there are many times when I'm in practice and I'm swimming in a hard swim set where I say to myself, okay, Evan, I know it's hard right now, but you just gotta keep swimming, swimming, swimming. And so I say that to myself to kind of just give me a little bit of motivation to keep swimming, and I do listen to Dory and I do keep swimming. But that is something I kind of chuckle to myself about when I'm in practice. So today I've shared with you how this film, Finding Nemo, has really moved me. It made me feel determined. It reminded me about the pain and the peer pressure that comes with it, and it also made me laugh. So in conclusion, there should be no doubt that this film, Finding Nemo, really moved me. Now, I don't expect to be kidnapped by a pair of Australian divers anytime soon, but if I were, I would just hope that my parents were as devoted and determined as Marlin.
Thank you. Over here.
Hi, I'm Alex.
Hi, Alex.
I liked how you had a lot of inflection in your voice, and you showed emotion while you were talking. You would laugh and chuckle to yourself, and you weren't just straight monotone the entire time. So that's cool.
Yes, improvement.
Hi, I'm Magali.
Hi, Magali.
I think you did really well. I really liked how you incorporated a song again, and then you went back to it and talked about his dad. Maybe an improvement, I would say. I think you did really well. Maybe just add something more at the end besides the the storyline. Maybe that's it.
Okay, yeah. You talked about growing up in California and growing up on the coast and Australia and Finding Nemo and the father and the son and the separation. So your tie back was you hope your parents try to find you. I guess that was your attempt to tie back, right? Is that how you,
if I were taken.
If you were
Seriously.
taken, then you'd like it that way. Okay. So you were trying to do that. It was. I'd like to see you try using different Paul McQuote story next time, not just a sort of a longish narrative about this. What you grew up in, a plot summary there. Okay, your thesis was fine. You had to skip back up to it, but you got it in, so that tells me you were aware of the whole schematic and what has to be in this to set that for your audience. Like to see you be a little bit more with your voice, determined, dangers of peer pressure, laugh, so emphasize that so we have the narrative kind of pushed out in our ears for us. Your sixth statement was fine. It was good, I wrote. Your first emotion, determined. Here you talked about, it reminded you of being in a high school honors English class and the teacher would not round up your 89.8 grade up to a 90 and give you the A, and she said it'd help you motivate you to work harder next year, and you did, and that was a good story. And what I'd like you to do is learn to focus a little bit more on the emotion as you're telling the story, and say, and use those words as you're focusing on the emotion. And I was so determined that next year I did every assignment. I was just determined to show that old bat that I was, gonna get that A. And I want to feel your determination, see? And then say the words again as I've been saying to other people. And that's why I felt so determined. End with it. On your second emotion, the danger of peer pressure, it was a good story, and flying off a mountain, whatever, because your friends dared you to, and it had a bad ending to it, and it sort of reminded you that you shouldn't do that. I wasn't sure just what emotion that was, but it was a good story. On the third emotion, laugh. Now here we had a clear emotion here, and I like the singing, and I like the mantra, and it comes up in a lot of these Disney films. Just keep swimming, and just to keep it going. It's just, when things get bad, you just roll on, you keep moving. And it's a good piece of advice, So I like the way you incorporated that. And I would have liked you just to have said, and as I find myself silently singing, I find myself sometimes chuckling to myself that I'm singing a silly child's movie song. But it does make me laugh. Returning to the emotions, see. Summary was good. Conclusion was good. And I talked to you already about how the tie back could have been strengthened. Your canais. You want strong eye contact. Don't lose your train of thought. And speak naturally rather than try to be memorized. Be extemporaneous, I assume you meant.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
It went pretty well. I had that little slip up where I kind of forgot the pieces, but I immediately
You doubled back and got to it. Yeah. Yeah, so I think you did a very nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Ready to rock and roll?
I am.
Great. Linnea stands before you managing attention, communicating respect non-verbally, Finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Oh, good, you're not wearing white. Say your name.
I borrowed this shirt.
Oh, good. Looks good on you. Say your looks good on the white background too. Say your name. Feel the love. Start your speech.
Hi, I'm Linnea.
Hi, Linnea.
Today I'm going to tell you about a film that analyzes the racial tensions throughout our Los Angeles community. It begins with a quote that says, "In LA, nobody touches you. We are all covered by a sheet of glass and metal, and sometimes we have to crash into one another just to feel something." This film is called Crash. This film made me feel angry, guilty, and joyful. Sarah Talby, a psychologist, reviews this film, saying that it is an artful depiction of the reality and misunderstanding surrounding race. So first I'll begin with how this film made me feel angry. So there's one situation where a black famous producer and his wife are coming home from an award show, and the wife is performing a sexual act, and a cop notices this, and he pulls them over, and the cop and his partner are both white males. Now the cop decides to take advantage of his superiority in the situation, and he takes the man and wife out of their car, makes them stand on the side of the road, completely humiliating them, and not really following the protocol. And he decides to pat down the man, and then he goes to pat down the wife, and inappropriately touches her without her consent, and basically feels her up, and she is in tears. She's really emotional. And the husband can't say anything because he knows and understands that if he decides to fight, they'll be taken downtown, they'll be taken for prosecution. And this just made me so angry and so infuriated because this kind of thing happens all the time, and these people are going about not being able to say anything and speak up for themselves because the law enforcement is being unfair. And I think this is very evident in what's been portrayed in the media, especially in recent events. So this made me really angry. The next emotion that I felt was guilt. There's one situation where the white district attorney and his wife are walking down what appears to be 3rd Street Promenade down in Santa Monica, and there are two young black males about our age just walking down the street, minding their own business, and the white lady decides to shrink to the side by her husband when she sees the two black males approaching her. And this is just evidence of her own prejudice. But then that prejudice is confirmed when the black males get upset and they pull a gun on the woman and the man and steal their car. And this made me feel guilty because when the woman cringed to the side, I realized that I myself have my own unconscious racial prejudices when I encounter people of a different race sometimes. And as a minority, I've felt that, and I think sometimes I reflect my own frustration with other races, and it just makes me feel guilty. And this film really made me realize that I have my own prejudices, and I need to address them and start to change. So that was how I felt guilty. And then my next emotion I felt was joy. My joy came out of what was a terrible, terrible scene in the film. So there's an Iranian man, he's a shopkeeper, and he has invested his whole life into this one shop. He's an immigrant. And then there's a Mexican man who is the locksmith for the shopkeeper, and he comes to fix the door and the lock and key, but they realize that the door is actually broken, and there's a language barrier there, so this broken door dilemma is never actually communicated. And so then someone breaks into the Iranian man's store and completely vandalizes the place, and the Iranian man is just furious because all of his life savings is ruined in one instance. And so the Iranian man takes his gun and he's going to get revenge on the Mexican man because he believes the Mexican man broke into his store. So he goes to the Mexican man's home in South Central, and he points the gun right at the Mexican man's head. But as that's happening, the Mexican man's young daughter is running out and tackles her dad out of joy and love and protection, and then the gun is fired. And so you think that the young girl has been shot. And at this point, I was just in tears. Like, how could this happen to this adorable little girl? And it's all over one simple misunderstanding. But then you realize that the Iranian man has actually shot a blank. And I just took like a sigh of relief. And I was overwhelmed with joy. This scene has flipped 180. And it really just made me realize how precious life is and how these misunderstandings, sometimes by a language barrier or race or anything, can be so detrimental. And it really made me appreciate my own family, and I didn't want to ever lose something like a loved one to some kind of misunderstanding like that. So this film made me feel angry, it made me feel guilty, and it made me feel joyful. And I don't think any film has ever brought me such a range of emotion. I would definitely say that Sarah Talby's film review is accurate, and you should for sure watch it. It'll help you understand our community here, and it'll help you bring respect and love to your own relationships. So watch the film.
Thank you. 546.
Hi, my name is Andre.
Hi, Andre.
I really like the speeches. You portrayed like your emotion through the speech the entire time. Every time you talked about something, I saw it in your face, and like you sighed and you said it with a sigh. It was very good. I really liked it.
Thanks.
And that was the purpose of the speech, wasn't it? To practice portraying and reliving our emotions that we felt while watching a movie. So felt sensitive. Prove it?
Hi, I'm Laura.
Hi, Laura.
You did a really good job, like, portraying your emotions, both by, like, explaining kind of, like, the reasoning behind your emotion and making us feel the emotions. But one thing you could have done is maybe give a story behind, you really need more back to your personal life, but you did a really good job.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, gosh. Let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start.
Sound of Music.
What?
It's from The Sound of Music.
Yes, from The Sound of Music, yes. When you sing, you begin with ABC. Okay, here we go. I like your quote from Crash. It's a very apt quote for Los Angeles. In LA, nobody touches you. We're always behind this metal and glass. I think we miss that touch so much. We crash into each other just so we can feel something. Yeah. Good quote to start with. I was looking for not go and see the movie as a tie back, but I was looking for you to come back to that quote and say, so maybe if you go and see this movie, you'll stop crashing into things and you'll learn to feel, or some play around with the quote, but go back to the quote of, so in LA nobody touches you. We crash into each other, but perhaps if you see the movie, you'll stop crashing or something. See? Something clever like that. Okay? Because that was your most vivid thing you started with, and so that's what you should have tied back to. Thesis, angry, guilty, joyful, good. Sarah Talby reviewed this film where, and the date. Throw that in there orally so your audience knows where it came from. I asked that you say whether you agree or disagree with the film. I know you agreed with the quote, but you didn't say it.
Okay.
So say I agree with her.
I think I said it at the end.
The very end. Yeah, you did.
I should say it
Okay, so angry, yeah. No one can watch this scene in this movie and not get angry. Yeah, just the scene alone itself just you describing it, I found myself remembering it and going, yeah, that was really outrageous. But as was suggested back here, we were looking for some personal story from you, and you said that you never had a exact parallel thing, thank God. But you wanted to reach through the screen and punch the cop. So, but we didn't get a personal story, but that was as personal as we got. But okay, on guilty, your second emotion, the white district attorney that thought they were going to get mugged and got mugged and so forth, and then you began to describe your own prejudice, which I thought was courageous on your part to describe it, because we all have prejudices, and people are often more willing than others to admit to some of them, I had one young lady from Chicago that told me there are some neighborhoods in Chicago she fears certain black people, certain young black men that she runs from because she feels they will harm her, and she was black. It was just, okay, that's honest, So it wasn't just whites that run from black young thug people, but she was saying, I do too. So it was an interesting comment. But I appreciate you sharing your own guilt, and I thought that was particularly powerful. On the locksmith story, again, a very powerful story. And again, you spent most of your time in telling the story, which is why you went a little bit over time. You didn't get much to your own kind of a personal story of. You said it just reminds me of how much I appreciate my family and how much I would hate to lose them in that way and that sort of thing, right? But you didn't have kind of a parallel story of a quote near life and death situation, but you did describe a very powerful scene, and we got the emotion from the scene, not from you relating how you felt about the scene, and then a little bit of your relating it to your family. See, your summary was good, your conclusion was good, and your tie back, I told you how you could make it better. Connive, maintain eye contact, shifting my focus around the room. Try to sound less rehearsed. Convey an emotional response to the film that audiences can relate to. How'd it go?
Good. It went well.
I think it went well too. Thank you very much. Okay, another B. Any more B's? Any more A's that we skipped? One more B. Yay. There's our time. Oh, we're good time.
Sorry, I didn't have a stapler.
Your name's not on this.
I wrote it right there, but I'll write it.
Oh, there it is. Okay, good. She's not wearing white. Hang on a minute, Lily. You're a different size. Let me get you in focus. Yes. Lily stands before you, managing attention. She's reading, he's writing, communicating respect non-verbally. Finding friendly eyes near the front and center. Say your name. Feel the love. Start your speech.
Hi, my name's Lily Raji.
Hi, Lily.
And you know that feeling you get when the movie credits are rolling at the end of the film? When you're excited after having just experienced a whole different world, when you're confused, or you're sad after having your heart basically ripped out by imaginary characters, or even breathless. To me, nothing compares to that feeling. Nothing compares to the feeling after going through the emotional journey a film has to offer. Today I'm going to share with you a film that definitely moved me and that stuck. I know we discussed in class ideas and stories that stick, but to me, a movie that makes you feel something is extremely sticky. The film Me Before You is one in particular that definitely stuck. It made me feel reflective, angry, and inspired. As stated in Vanity Fair on June 2nd, 2016, Me Before You does not shy away from the difficulty at its center, while still giving us something cozy and romantic and, in a weird way, aspirational, and I definitely agree with that. So the film follows the story of Louisa Clark. She's an ordinary girl that lives in a small town in England working to support her family. However, everything changes for her when she starts to work as a caretaker for Will Traynor. Will Traynor is a young, successful, adventurous banker who has spent the last 2 years of his life living at home after an accident left him paralyzed. Louisa soon learns of his plans to go through with assisted suicide and decides to make it her mission to change his mind and show him that he can still enjoy life despite his condition. So the first way that the film moved me was that it made me feel reflective. The scene that made me feel reflective took place at the beginning when Will is walking to work on a rainy day in London and a motorcycle going too fast hits him and leaves him paralyzed below the neck. So that scene made me feel reflective because it reminded me of something that happened to me a couple months ago. And that's when my parents decided to tell me that we're moving out of our childhood home, the home that I've lived in since I was born. I remember feeling extremely upset, and I wasted so much energy crying and trying to convince them otherwise. And this scene really put things into perspective for me. It made me realize how insignificant such little worries are, how important it is to live every day to its fullest, because you never know how things can change. I saw a successful young man go from having everything to losing everything he loved about life within seconds, and that really made me see the big picture of how insignificant such little worries are. So besides reflective, the movie also made me feel angry. The scene that made me feel angry was when, despite all Louisa's efforts at making him happy and the love that they grew to have for each other, Will decides to travel to Switzerland where assisted suicide is legal and to go through with his plan. The scene made me feel angry because it reminded me of something that happened in my own life last October. My aunt passed away after dealing with lupus for several years, and this scene made me feel really angry because I remember her always telling me how tired she was of fighting and how much she still wanted to live. And it made me feel angry because Will had the opportunity to keep living. He actually had a choice, and he decided not to live anymore, when there are so many other people out there like my aunt who are never given that opportunity, who have life taken away from them, and I felt like he had wasted that opportunity. So the third way that the movie moved me was that it made me feel inspired. The scene that made me feel inspired was when Louisa is reading the goodbye letter that Will left for her. In the letter, he urges her to push herself, to not settle, and to live boldly. It reminded me of something my aunt told me in her last year of life, which was to always push myself out of my comfort zone, try new things, and enjoy everything that life has to offer. So this scene made me feel inspired because it reminded me of the words that she said, and hearing him say it kind of reinforced that feeling of wanting to enjoy everything that life has to offer, to enjoying every day like it really is my last. So in summary, I've told you 3 ways that the movie moved me. It made me reflect. It made me realize how insignificant little worries are and how we should spend our time enjoying every day. It made me feel angry that somebody would give up the opportunity to live, and it made me feel inspired It inspired me to live every day like it's my last. This film is definitely a film I'll never forget. It took me through an emotional journey. It was sticky. It was really sticky. It was simple. It had an unexpected ending. It was concrete. It was credible. It showed you what it's really like to live with a paralyzed condition. It was definitely emotional and had so many stories that made me feel reflective, angry, inspired, and so many other emotions. I hope it made me think back to a quote in the book Made to Stick that we're reading that said, "Feelings inspire people to act." And I hope this film, hearing about it, inspires you guys to actually live like it inspired me to.
Thank you. 501. Okay, where are we? Huh?
Hi everyone, I'm Jarelli.
Thank you,
My
Jarelli.
speech was very good. I like the way you connected to the film, but maybe change your tone so that it can be clear.
Okay. Improvement.
Hi, I'm Linnea.
What's your name?
Linnea.
Renea?
Linnea.
Linnea. Hi, Linnea.
I thought your story about your aunt was really powerful, and I could tell that you had a lot of emotion behind that story. And then I would just say, as an improvement, try not to look up or down, and just keep your eye level. Nice talk.
Well, Lily, I like your speech. I liked your integrating the book and the text and the sticky references and integrating that knowledge into your speech. I think it's an illusion that people that have read the text or will be reading the text can appreciate. And it helps you. I think you can see how filmmakers are using many of these techniques to make their films more successful. Your thesis was fine. Me Before You, reflective, anger, and inspired. Vanity Fair, you gave the date, and you said you agreed with it, and so that was fine. On your first emotion, I'm not like it was okay because it was short enough, but you don't really need the plot summary. Reflective, motorcycle hurt, and you related the idea that you got very upset and were very immature in how you related to your family selling their house, and then you got some perspective on it and said, I'm freaking out over my parents selling their house. I could have been paralyzed from the neck down. I could be, dead. I could be a lot of things, and I'm still here, and, this isn't the end of the world. It's all in the perspective. So, yes, I would have just liked you to have returned to a little bit more the reflecting that you were doing and the internal reflecting, and that's why I reflected on this. And the one that I thought was the real opportunity was anger. When you felt that you talked about your aunt who wanted to live but couldn't, and this guy could live but didn't want to live, I wanted you to get more into your anger and feel it and express it and dwell on it more and re-feel it and end that segment with, and that's why I felt so angry. See? So we felt it more there too. You'll see when you watch yourself tonight on YouTube, you kind of just go over it, the anger of it, and you leave us to infer that you were angry. And you don't really sense it like I'm trying to teach you to do. inspired. I like that you were inspired by the advice that your aunt gave you, and I thought those were good words of advice, and I could feel your inspiration. Just remember to say that's why I felt inspired. Summary, conclusion, and tie back were all fine. I like the sticky tie back. Your canais, constant and never-ending improvement. Move around when speaking. Watch hand gestures and speak less quickly. How'd it go?
I think I didn't move around, so I need to do that.
Right.
I think compared to last time, because I remember last time I spoke really quickly, so I think I improved on that.
Slow down, yes.
It wasn't as fast. And
hand gestures.
I caught myself a couple times wanting to go back to holding my hand like that, and I quickly put down. So
okay.
Watch that.
Let me see you move now. Tell us about your morning. Move 3, 5, 3.
Okay. This morning I woke up very tired after an extra.
That was a measly 3. Making a more a wider 3. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
This morning I woke up feeling very tired after our next door neighbors decided that they wanted to party until 4 a.m. I woke up to the noise of our maintenance people coming over.
4, 5.
After
Another
our
step.
apartment flooded over the weekend while we were at home. And then I practiced my speech a little bit, and I walked to class.
Okay, come back, and when you come to a stop, come into the power stance. See? Back with your feet wider than your shoulders like a tripod. Okay. Yeah, I think you improved. I'd like to see you walk naturally and practice walking when you practice your speech, because you won't just automatically remember to do it. Other than that, you did a nice job, Lily. Thank you. Any more A's or B's? Okay, I guess our work is done for the day. Return with honor. Oh, you want to do an intro speech? Who wants to do an intro speech? Okay, let's have one intro speech. How's our time? Yeah, we're good. Hi.